I am sitting here looking at a document that has been circulating among defense analysts for the past several days, and I need you to sit with me for a moment before I tell you what it says. It is not a battle damage assessment. It is not a casualty report. It is not a summary of strikes on nuclear sites or missile batteries or command centers. It is a flight operations order. And what it says, stripped of the bureaucratic language, is this: United States Air Force F-35 sorties over central Iran have been reduced. Deep penetration strikes, the missions where the most expensive, most advanced fighter aircraft on Earth fly hundreds of kilometers inside one of the most densely defended airspaces in the region, have been quietly pulled back, not eliminated, reduced. But the word that matters is not what was changed. The word that matters is why. On March 19, 2026, an F-35 Lightning II, the aircraft the United States has spent $1.7 trillion developing and acquiring, the aircraft that was supposed to be untouchable, the aircraft that 19 allied nations have built their air forces around, made an emergency landing at a U.S. base in the Middle East. The pilot was in stable condition. He had shrapnel wounds. That landing was the moment a red line was crossed. Not a political red line, not a diplomatic one, a physical one. The line that said, "This aircraft cannot be hit in contested airspace." That line no longer exists, and the consequences of what happened on that day and what happened in the weeks after it are being systematically underreported by every major outlet covering this war. So today I'm going to walk you through exactly what Iran did, exactly how it did it, exactly what it means for every air campaign the United States plans to fly for the next decade, and exactly why the Strait of Hormuz situation today looks nothing like what Washington told you it would look like 7 weeks ago. This is the analysis you are not getting anywhere else. Stay with me because the full picture is more consequential than any single headline. Subscribe now if you have not already, because what I am about to cover connects dots that are being deliberately kept separate by official briefings and by media organizations that are covering the press conference version of this war rather than the operational version. Let me start with the aircraft itself, because understanding what the F-35 was designed to be is the only way to understand what Iran just proved it is not. The F-35 Lightning II is the centerpiece of a program that has consumed more money than any weapon system in human history. The program's total life cycle cost is currently estimated at $1.7 trillion by the Congressional Budget Office. The aircraft costs between $80 and $110 million per unit, depending on the variant. The United States Air Force, Navy, and Marine Corps collectively operate more than 600 of them. 19 allied nations have bought or ordered them. The program employs 254,000 workers across 1,400 suppliers in 45 states. What makes the F-35 special, what justified that investment, is not its speed, it is not its weapons load, it is stealth, specifically radar stealth. The aircraft's design, its internal weapons bays, its radar-absorbing coatings, its carefully angled surfaces, all exist to reduce its radar cross-section, the signature that radar systems use to detect an aircraft, to a level that is roughly equivalent to a metal golf ball. Standard air defense radars, the kind that have historically been used to target aircraft, cannot reliably acquire it at the ranges required to fire a missile with any probability of a kill. That capability is what America's entire deep penetration strike doctrine is built on. F-35s enter defended airspace. Standard air defenses cannot see them. They strike their targets. They exit. That is the plan. That is what the program cost $1.7 trillion to build. On March 19th, Iran found a seam in that plan. And once a seam is found, it does not close. Received. That is the foundation you need to understand everything that follows. Let me now explain the weapon that found the seam, because this is the part that most English language outlets covered in a single paragraph before moving on, and that single paragraph does not contain nearly enough information to understand what actually happened operationally. The system Iran used to damage the F-35 over central Iran is called the Majid, also designated the AD-08. It was developed domestically by Iran's Defense Industries Organization and first displayed publicly at a military parade in April 2021. It is not a sophisticated long-range system. It is not a Russian S-300 or S-400. It is not a medium-range missile battery capable of engaging aircraft at 40 or 50 kilometers. The Majid is a short-range point defense system. Maximum engagement range, 8 kilometers. Maximum altitude, 6 kilometers. It mounts on a highly mobile RS-2 tactical vehicle, which means it can be repositioned rapidly, hidden, moved, and redeployed without any signature that satellite imagery would easily identify. Here's what makes it dangerous to an aircraft that is supposed to be invisible to radar. The Majid does not use radar. It uses passive infrared guidance, thermal imaging, heat-seeking. The F-35 was designed to defeat radar. Its radar-absorbent materials, its internal weapon bays, its geometric shaping, all of it reduces the radio frequency signature that radar systems need to detect and track an aircraft. But those measures do nothing against a system that is not looking for radar reflections. A passive infrared system is looking for heat, and the F-35 has heat. Its Pratt & Whitney F-135 engine produces an enormous thermal signature from the exhaust nozzle, a signature that exhaust cooling and nozzle shaping can reduce but, at close range or from the right aspect angle, cannot eliminate. What the F-35's radar warning receivers are designed to do is detect radar emissions. They alert the pilot when a radar system is tracking the aircraft. That alert gives the pilot time to maneuver, to deploy countermeasures, to break the track. The Majid does not emit radar, it emits nothing. It watches passively, it listens to heat, and because it emits nothing, the F-35's radar warning receivers heard nothing. According to reporting by Defense Security Asia and corroborated by analysts at Military Watch magazine, the pilot received no radar warning before the missile detonated adjacent to the aircraft. A single AD-08 missile, 75 kilograms, passive infrared seeker, closed on the F-35's heat signature and detonated. The pilot took shrapnel wounds. The aircraft made an emergency landing. That is what happened on March 19th. That is the seam. Not a technological defeat of radar stealth. A conceptual defeat. Iran found a weapon class that stealth provides essentially no protection against, deployed it along likely approach vectors, and waited. There is a further complication that the official briefings are not emphasizing. The F-35's Block 4 software upgrade, the version that would allow the aircraft to deploy air-to-ground missiles from extended standoff distances, is not yet complete across the fleet. What that means operationally is that F-35s conducting strike missions cannot release weapons at distances that would keep them far from their targets. They have to get close, close enough for gravity bombs, close enough for the Majid to see them. According to reporting by Military Watch, the inherent requirement to fly near targets is what exposed the aircraft to the specific engagement geometry that the Majid operates within. You cannot defeat a heat-seeking short-range system by reducing your radar cross-section. You defeat it by staying out of its engagement envelope. And the F-35, because of its software limitations, could not stay out of that envelope while still executing its mission. This is not a temporary problem. This is not a software patch that is 6 weeks away. The Block 4 program is years from completion across the full fleet, and Iran knows this. Received, that is announcement number 1. Now let me walk you through what happened after March 19th, because the operational changes that followed are the proof that what occurred was not just an embarrassing incident, it was a strategic inflection. According to reporting by Military Watch magazine in the final week of March, the United States Air Force and the Israeli Air Force were reported to have considerably reduced deep penetration strikes over Iranian territory following the confirmed successful surface-to-air attack on the F-35. The reduction is not publicized. CENTCOM briefings have continued to emphasize the number of targets struck, the number of Iranian submarines destroyed, the number of Iranian vessels hit. CENTCOM spokesperson Captain Tim Hawkins confirmed the F-35 landed safely and described the incident as under investigation. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth said the United States was winning decisively and that Iran's air defenses had been flattened. But here is what the briefings do not say. The aircraft that was used for the most strategically critical missions, the ones that required flying deepest into Iranian airspace, above the most critical targets, through the most heavily defended zones, that aircraft is now operating under a different risk calculus. The pilots and commanders who fly those missions now know something they did not know on February 28th. The Majid is out there, it does not emit, it cannot be jammed, and one missile is apparently enough to end a mission. And the Majid is not the only system creating this problem. By early April, according to reporting confirmed by CBS News, Iran had destroyed 24 MQ-9 Reaper drones. The MQ-9 costs approximately $30 million per unit, 24 of them. $720 million in unmanned aircraft, destroyed by Iranian air defense systems operating in the same degraded, supposedly flattened environment that official briefings were describing as a success. On March 27th, Iranian missiles struck a base in Saudi Arabia, and evidence, including EU satellite imagery and independent assessment published by the Daily Mail, indicates that as many as 7 KC-135 refueling tankers were damaged or destroyed at a single airbase on a single day. The KC-135 is the backbone of American aerial refueling operations. Without KC-135 tankers, F-35s and F-15s cannot reach targets at distance. They cannot loiter over a target area. They cannot sustain the sortie rates that deep penetration strike campaigns require. One KC-135 cost $240 million to replace with its modern equivalent. 7 damaged or destroyed at one base, one day, one missile strike. None of this appears in the victory narrative that the official briefings are constructing. Received. That is announcement number 2. Now let me connect this to what is happening right now, today, April 18th, because the situation in the Strait of Hormuz is not resolved. It is not stable. And the events of the past week prove that the operational constraints created by what happened on March 19th are still shaping decisions. On April 7th, President Trump announced on Truth Social that the United States and Iran had reached a 2-week ceasefire brokered by Pakistan. Iran would reopen the Strait of Hormuz. The announcement came hours before a threatened deadline for massive infrastructure strikes. Markets responded immediately. U.S. crude oil prices dropped 16.4%. The Dow had its best single day in over a year. By April 9th, the Abu Dhabi National Oil Company CEO Sultan Al Jaber said publicly that the strait was still not open. 230 loaded oil tankers were waiting inside the Gulf. Iran was restricting passage and charging tolls exceeding $1 million per ship per transit. On April 12th, Vice President J.D. Vance announced that the Islamabad talks had failed. Iran refused to concede on uranium enrichment, refused to dismantle proxy networks, refused to eliminate the toll system it had unilaterally imposed on Hormuz shipping. On April 13th, Trump declared a naval blockade of the strait. The IRGC Navy responded that any military vessel approaching the strait would be considered a ceasefire violation and would meet a severe response. And then, on April 17th, Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi announced the strait was open to all shipping traffic for the duration of the ceasefire in Lebanon, not permanently, not unconditionally, conditionally, while Lebanon holds. Think about what that sequence reveals. The United States launched an air campaign described as the most intensive aerial bombardment of a state actor since the Gulf War. CENTCOM struck more than 8,000 Iranian military targets over 40 days. 130 Iranian vessels were hit. 11 Iranian submarines were destroyed. The Natanz nuclear facility was struck with bunker buster bombs. The total U.S. military expenditure as of March 19th was estimated at $18 billion, and the Pentagon requested an additional $200 billion. After all of that, the Strait of Hormuz is open, conditionally, while Lebanon holds, with Iran charging tolls on commercial shipping, with 230 loaded tankers still waiting, with commercial insurance premiums still elevated to levels that make normal transit economically marginal for most operators. The U.S. red line at the beginning of this conflict was reopen the strait. That red line was not met through military superiority. It was met through a negotiated ceasefire brokered by Pakistan, conditioned on events in Lebanon, with Iran retaining effective control over access to a waterway through which 20% of the world's seaborne oil normally flows. That is not a red line that held. That is a red line that was redrawn. Here is the part that nobody wants to say out loud, but that this analysis is going to say clearly. If you filled your car up this week, the price you paid at the pump is a direct consequence of what happened on March 19th in the skies over central Iran. Before February 28th, Brent crude was trading in ranges consistent with normal market conditions. Within weeks of the conflict beginning, analysts were warning of $100 per barrel oil if disruptions persisted. The closure of the strait severed between 12 and 15 million barrels of crude oil per day from global markets. That is not an abstraction. That is your heating bill. That is the freight cost embedded in everything you buy at a grocery store. That is the airline ticket you cannot afford to change because fuel surcharges have added hundreds of dollars to every domestic flight. Every dollar of elevated oil prices above the pre-conflict baseline represents a direct transfer of economic pressure from Washington to the populations of the United States and its allies, not from weapons. From 75-kilogram missiles that cost a fraction of what they are disrupting. The F-35 incident is not a story about a single aircraft. It is a story about the gap between what American military power is designed to do and what it can actually achieve in an environment where the adversary has spent 4 decades studying the exact dimensions of that gap and building systems designed to exploit them. Received. That is announcement number 3. Now I want to be honest with you about something, because presenting only the narrative of Iran's operational success without acknowledging the genuine constraints on Iran's position would be exactly the kind of analysis I criticize in other outlets. Iran cannot maximize its use of the Hormuz closure without damaging its own interests. Iran exports oil. That oil transits the same waterway where the mines were deployed and where the IRGC Navy is operating. The Iranian government assessed the damage to its own economy from the conflict at a minimum of $300 billion and potentially as high as $1 trillion, according to reporting on April 11th. Iran's infrastructure has sustained real losses across the country. The ceasefire Iran accepted represents a recognition of those constraints. The terms Iran achieved, a conditioned reopening of the strait, the retention of a nuclear program and enrichment capability, the avoidance of infrastructure strikes on power plants and bridges, are the best achievable outcome from a position of genuine vulnerability, not the terms of a country operating from unconstrained strength. What the F-35 incident revealed is not that Iran has defeated American air power. It revealed that Iran has denied American air power the freedom of operation that the $1.7 trillion investment was supposed to guarantee. Those are different things. Denial is not defeat. But denial is operationally significant in a way that denial has not been in any prior American air campaign against a regional adversary. The Chinese YLC 8B UHF band radar systems that intelligence reports as of April 13th indicate have been deployed along the Iranian coastline are specifically tuned to detect low observable platforms, F-35s, B-21s. If those systems are operational, the already constrained deep penetration strike capability becomes more constrained, not less. So here is where the situation stands right now, and here are the three paths forward that I see with genuine analytical clarity. The first path is what I will call the conditioned equilibrium. The Lebanon ceasefire holds. Iran keeps the strait nominally open. Commercial traffic gradually resumes at elevated insurance premiums. The toll dispute is quietly resolved or quietly ignored. Neither side claims a decisive victory. Oil stabilizes somewhere between $85 and $95 per barrel. The United States does not resume deep penetration strikes and does not publicly acknowledge why. Iran retains its nuclear program, its enrichment capability, and its air defense infrastructure. The $200 billion Pentagon supplemental request funds a military that has demonstrated it cannot achieve its stated objectives through air power alone. This is the most likely outcome. But it is not a resolution. It is a suspension. The fundamental questions about Iran's nuclear program, about Hormuz access, about the sustainability of the financial pressure on both sides remain unanswered. The second path is renewed escalation. Israel's operations in Lebanon destabilize the ceasefire before it produces any lasting framework. The IRGC Navy intercepts a commercial vessel that paid tolls in what the U.S. blockade considers an interdictable manner. An incident occurs that neither side planned, and neither side can immediately de-escalate. The Islamabad talks failed once. There is no established mechanism to prevent another failure. If the strait closes again, the oil market shock is not gradual, it is immediate. And the political pressure on the Trump administration from gas prices already elevated above pre-conflict baselines becomes pressure measured in approval ratings and midterm calculations. The third path, and this is the one I think is most underappreciated, is a slow operational degradation that neither side formally acknowledges. The U.S. does not announce that deep penetration strikes are permanently constrained. Iran does not announce that it is permanently altered the risk calculus for F-35 operations. The strait technically remains open. Tanker traffic remains below historical norms because insurance premiums remain elevated. The economic damage accumulates slowly rather than catastrophically. 6 months from now, 12 months from now, the global energy infrastructure has quietly reorganized around the assumption that Hormuz is a conditional waterway rather than a guaranteed one, and that reorganization happens without any treaty, any agreement, any official recognition that a strategic shift has occurred. That third path is the one that is hardest to see in any single news cycle, but easiest to see when you look at the trajectory of every week since February 28th. Let me close by bringing you back to the aircraft. The F-35 program was designed to maintain American air superiority into the 2070s. 19 nations aligned their defense planning around the assumption that this aircraft would operate with effective impunity in contested airspace. That assumption was built into procurement decisions, into alliance commitments, into the architecture of air operations across multiple potential theaters. On March 19, 2026, over central Iran, a 75-kilogram infrared missile mounted on a mobile tactical vehicle, built by a country under decades of international sanctions, produced by engineers working around every embargo placed on Iranian defense procurement, found the seam in that assumption. One aircraft, one missile, one emergency landing. The aircraft landed safely. The pilot is in stable condition, but somewhere in the flight operations orders that are currently governing U.S. and Israeli air operations over Iran, there is a quiet adjustment that reflects a calculation that did not exist before March 19th. The most advanced aircraft on Earth is flying differently than it did before. Different altitudes, different approach vectors, different targets, or not flying certain missions at all. That adjustment does not appear in any press conference. It is not in any official statement from CENTCOM or from the Pentagon or from the White House. It is in the operational choices of the commanders who understand what the Majid found and what it means for every future mission until the Block 4 software is complete, until the Verba manpads deliveries that Iran reportedly signed in $580 million agreement with Russia to acquire in February are accounted for, until a new operational doctrine addresses the specific vulnerability that passive infrared guidance exposes in a platform designed for radar stealth. The questions I want you to hold as you follow the next developments in this conflict are these. How does an alliance of 19 nations recalibrate its air operations doctrine when the foundational assumption of that doctrine has been operationally challenged? And what does a country do when the adversary it was targeting has demonstrated, at a cost of tens of millions of dollars of its own defense development against a $1.7 trillion program, that the seam exists and can be found? Those questions are not rhetorical. They are what the next phase of this conflict is going to force an answer to, whether the briefings acknowledge them or not. Tell me in the comments what you think happens next with the Strait. Tell me if you think the Block 4 limitations were a strategic miscalculation that should have been addressed before any decision to fly F-35s over central Iran. Tell me if you are watching what this war is doing to your energy bills, because I am reading every comment and I want to know what the operational picture looks like from where you are sitting. We will keep tracking every development in the air, at sea, in the financial markets, and in the flight operations orders that nobody is publishing, but everyone paying attention can read between the lines. Subscribe now so you do not miss the next analysis. Turn on notifications. This situation is not resolved, it is suspended, and a suspended situation always returns.